What do you do, speaking of animals, if you're in a war theater and the typical animals that you consume for food have been devastated as a result of the war? And the animals that are running around, cats and dogs and strays and rodents and all of that, which are
not kosher.
halal, it's
Haram.
haram, I couldn't think of the word, which are haram, not legally allowed for eating. What do you do? Well, what you do is go to this article, which is where? What was this thing in? Washington Times.
That one.
Right now in Syria, because of the Syrian civil war, and the civil war means a civil war between whom?
Muslims and more Muslims.
In society, yeah.
Muslims and more Muslims. Civil war is usually people who have the same nation are fighting each other. In this case, it's Muslims against Muslims. So Muslim clerics said, because well, I'll just read it. A bad humanitarian situation has turned worse as Syrian President Bashar Assad has escalated a war against the rebels, who are Muslims, including some ties with Al-Qaeda, Muslims, even as progress has been made on the destruction of the regime's stockpiles of weapons. And the problem is that there are not enough good animals to go around, and you're not allowed to eat cats and dogs, especially during this past holiday.
Ramadan.
Not Ramadan.
No, Ramadan.
Eid.
The
Eid. Remember we said
Adar.
Al-Hajj.
Yeah.
The Hajj Eid. And on all these Eid things, you gorge yourself.
Yeah, you
Right.
slaughtered like thousands and hundreds of
You
millions
eat
of
on Eid.
goats.
So Muslims all over the world are stuffing their fat faces and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And in Syria, Muslims are dying because they don't have enough food. So what do the
They
clerics
just eat organs of those they've killed on live video.
Yeah, the leaders do that. That's an occult belief.
Yeah.
And there is an occult relationship, believe me, to Islam. But what they did is the clerics have pronounced a fatwa, a legal ruling, a fatwa, F-A-T-W-A, legal ruling, and said you can eat dogs and cats right now, which hitherto you weren't allowed to do.
Well, of course, it makes perfect sense because under Islam, you're allowed to make legal everything that is illegal under Islam if it furthers the cause of jihad.
Right.
And so if you're a jihadi fighting in Syria, you're allowed to do anything that you wouldn't be allowed to do unless you were on the jihad.
Going back to eating dogs and
Wars.
cats.
Oh, no.
I am starving, by the way.
Part of this is a public relations effort by the imams to draw human suffering attention to this, bring the United Nations, bring everybody in to stop this war.
Things are so bad we have to eat Fido.
Yeah, the little babies are eating Fido. No, they don't. Yeah, little babies are eating dogs and cats. But the big question is a serious question on Jumpin' Juma Freaky Friday. These are Muslims fighting Muslims. This is not supposed to be. How come the OIC, we've asked this question a million times, Organization for Islamic Cooperation,
Where are they?
or the Arab League, how come they can't intervene and stop this war?
It's
each
the
other.
Jews. Last week, Tom, you had an Iranian Ayatollah blaming the Jews and Americans for the rift between Shia and Sunni.
Right.
A country that didn't exist for over a millennium after they started killing each other.
the northern border of Israel, southern border of Lebanon, Hezbollah territory, and also over in the West Bank area. Everything they do, they blame on the Jews. And so their unification, if you will, the OIC is unification against Jews because the Jews are the problem. They must be eradicated. They must be exterminated. And Israel must be delegitimized as a state. That's their raison d'etre for everything.
But we have said, folks, for a long time, we've got to close the show now, that Syria, we should put one of those glass covers, like you cover the turkey, over Syria.
dome.
A little dome. And draw attention to it to show the failed state of Islam. And one of the reasons why we do Jumpin' Juma Freaky Friday is out of concern for Muslims that you are participating in a failed system. Islam is a categorically failed political system. You can worship any way you want, but recognize the fact that it's in a constant state of war, And if they're not warring against Jews or Christians or infidels, they turn inward and war against one another, the Shia and the Sunni.
In other
It's
words,
a warlike mentality, the antithesis of anybody's concept of a good God. This is a warrior God back from pagan days, which is where Islam came out of. And past week at the Hajj, circling the moon rock in the Kaaba, is exactly a pagan activity.